is Karen Fitzgerald, and I'm the Jewish lay leader here at Joint Base Lewis McChord. We can be found at the Main Post Chapel Annex and on Facebook, JBLM Jewish Community. Links are also available on First Corps Chapel pages. And now the following discussion in Devar Torah is for the week of 16 August. The Torah portion for this week is Shoftim, which stands for Judges, Deuteronomy 16:18 to 21:9. Parsha Shoftim deals with the primary arms of authority in biblical Israel: judges, monarchs, priests, and prophets. The Israelites are to appoint magistrates and judges in each settlement, and these are commanded to show impartiality toward all cases and petitioners, being scrupulously to avoid any bribes. Justice, justice shall you pursue, was to guide their deliberations and their procedures. The Torah provides a system of referral from a local court to a high court to handle cases that the local court cannot decide. This biblical grant of authority to the magistrate in charge at the time and the mandate to observe scrupulously all their instructions to you so that you must not deviate from their verdict forms the basis for rabbinical authority to this very day. The Israelites are permitted to establish a monarchy as they desire, but Moses places limits on the king's authority and power. The only responsibility that Deuteronomy explicitly assigns the king is to write and study a copy of the Torah. Clearly, this monarchy was to be under the authority of the law and answerable to it. The king's wealth, stables, and harem were all limited so that he will not act haughtily toward his fellows or deviate from the Torah. The Parsha then restates the laws of the cities of asylum, establishing the laws regarding international murder, and discusses the inviolability of boundaries and the law requiring not less than 2 witnesses. Chapter 20 establishes the laws of just warfare, limiting the extent to which military can strike against civilians and who may be drafted, and the treatment of surrounding agriculture. Chapter 21 deals with a case of unsolved murder. And now the Half Torah for Shoftim is the book of Isaiah, 51.12 to 52.12. The prophet brings a message of hope to his people exiled in Babylonia. They no longer need fear the tyrant who rules over them, for God has remembered his people, and Jerusalem will rise again. The captive Judeans will be freed once more. Jerusalem will soon be redeemed from the conqueror, and the people will rejoice in Zion. They must now prepare for a happy return to their beloved land. God and Israel are to be reunited, and the nations will witness the great happening. Babylonian captivity will end as the captivity did in Egypt. And now I'd like to do a little Devar Torah on Judges, and it's from my favorite book, The Bedside Torah. And this is called This is called You Can So Be Too Rich. We are justly proud of the ability of our economy to provide so many basics and so much comfort to our own people and to those around the world. The power of American enterprise, while its abundance and its energy is remarkable by any standard. What used to be affordable only for nobility and the wealthy is now within reach of the average American. We are all familiar with the popular adage, you can never be too rich or too thin. Well, we've learned, of course, that indeed you can be too thin. We read of and perhaps know of people with anorexia in our own society. We also see photographs of starving children in newspapers and on television. We also see that many of the world's people being too thin is a dangerous part of the human condition. But what about our wealth? Is it possible to be too wealthy? Imagine the wonderful activities and comforts you could buy with more money. A luxurious mansion, perhaps a home in some exotic part of the world, expensive art, magnificent jewelry. The possibilities are enticing and endless. Money may not be able to buy happiness, but it might well buy the things that buy happiness. But today's Torah portion relates an example of too much wealth in ancient Israel, the king. The Torah says of the king, he shall not keep many horses or send people back to Egypt to add to his horses. And he shall not have many wives, lest his heart go astray, nor shall he amass silver and gold to excess. Apparently, it is possible to possess too much silver and gold. God's concern is that the king will become the captive of his wealth, that all their possessions will alter his perspective and determine his agenda. In striking contrast to the rest of the world, ancient Israel was a notoriously democratic society. After leaving Egypt, the Israelite slaves did not establish a new state. Instead, they found a system of laws that applied equally to every member of society. No nobility, no monarchy could alter the egalitarian nature of biblical Israel. In the eyes of God, all were equal. In the eyes of the society, the only sovereign was God. After 200 years of this democracy, the people longed for a king to rule over them so they could be like all the nations. That repudiation of Jewish distinction was the death toll for the sacred way that has stained our people. The law in the Torah accurately summarized what happened with Israel's kings. Obsessed with adding more palaces, more slaves, more wives, and more wealth, they led the nation away from the moral rigor and passions for justice that characterize the Torah. Instead of focusing on wealth, the Torah urges another form of responsibility for the king. And I quote, "When he is seated on his royal throne, he shall have a copy of this teaching written for him on a scroll by the Levitical priests. Let it remain with him, and let him read in it all his life, so that he may learn to revere the Lord his God, to observe faithfully every word of this teaching, as well as these laws. Thus he will not act haughtily toward his fellows, or deviate from the instructions to the right or to the left." Rather than focusing on his wealth, the king is commanded to focus on the Torah. By reading it repeatedly, he will retain a perspective about what is of eternal worth and what is merely a tool for better living. When the ultimate focus in life is money and the things that money can buy, the feelings of other people are of little esteem, and the values of our tradition seem largely irrelevant. Ironically, when wealth is the highest goal, no amount of money is enough. Insatiable demands can never be satisfied. But if money and comfort are recognized for what they are, useful tools to allow us to focus on other things, character, compassion, justice, and spirit, then it becomes possible to experience contentment. One can own enough and enjoy sufficient income to be able to attend to the needs of others and one's own morality. More than that is too much. Who is rich? The Mishnah asks. One who is content with his portion. This Shabbat, consider just how rich you already are and how content. I wish you all a good week, Shavua Tov, and until next time, thank you.